Good afternoon, good evening, people that have welcome to show up at the WISH working group. I'm one of your working group chairs, Sean, and Niels is here as well.
Evening. Welcome to WISH.
A little early for Niels.
Yep.
But let's get it started. So some little notes for your virtual interim working virtual meeting hosts. Please make sure your video is off unless you're speaking, unless you want to have people know, and that's great. Please mute your microphone unless you're speaking. Here's the links to the Meet Echo and audio stuff. Here's the note well, which is kind of a wall of text about hey, if you're participating in the IETF, you need to adhere to a bunch of policies related to IPR and a bunch of other things. It gives you links to working group process and how things go, and then any harassment and code of conduct and things and copyright, etc. For the code of conduct, we're going to get to that in a second. For the IPR, it's pretty straightforward. If you know anything, you need to speak up. Or if you contribute, you need to disclose. Straightforward. We got a slide on the IETF Code of Conduct since it's Friday. Hopefully you've all seen this multiple times. This working group has not suffered from this problem, but I guess we want to treat everybody the same. So kind of give everybody the guidelines, like basically treat everybody with respect. Try to speak slowly, which I often have a problem with, so I will try to do it slowly as well. Please dispute ideas by using reasoned arguments. Use your best judgment, engineering judgment. Please try to find the best solution for the whole of the internet and contribute to the ongoing work by, the group or the IETF. Remember that the Code of Conduct guidelines are applicable to both the Meet Echo stream as well as the Jabber and email list. And we appreciate you for doing the right thing heretofore. Again, WISH at IETF 112. Here's our quick agenda. We're gonna do some administrivia. Luckily the blue sheets are now automatically generated. We did not coordinate this beforehand, but is there anyone that's willing to take notes for us? And all we need is the high points. We don't need blow by blow, just any decisions we make.
That.
Adam, was that you saying yes?
Yes, that's Adam.
Awesome. Great. So we got that. We have a Jabber scribe. Luckily, this is all kind of integrated. So I'm hoping that there's anybody that's in the Jabber stream that pops in. We'll be able to figure that out. So if anybody feels that they have any kind of audio problems, feel free to put like Mike, MIC : in front of their points in the Jabber room and or in the chat, and we can make sure it gets discussed on get some live time. So I need to update that. We're not just chartered. So basically our quick agenda is we're going to talk about the draft, the WISH WHIP draft. Then we're going to have some hackathon discussions, and then some implementation experience from 2 implementers, which I think is great because it makes our job a whole lot easier as chairs when there's multiple sets of implementers. Would anyone like to bash the agenda? Tim, go ahead.
Just to say I can add a kind of 2 seconds of implementation experience as a third implementation, a client implementation I did in the run-up to the hackathon.
Absolutely. Very exciting. The more the merrier is how I look at it. Oftentimes we progress protocols in the IETF and there's no one implementing them. So it's good that this is happening here. I guess my only note of caution is that we are supposed to liaison / discuss with other working groups. So one of the things that I guess I want to talk about at the end, if we have time, is at what point do we need to let other people know that we're having this implementation experience going on, and what do we need to do to make sure that we get review from other working groups before we proceed too far. So with that though, we're going to jump right in the draft. So Sergio, feel free to take the floor, sir.
Yeah. So first slide, please. So basically the first draft was based on the version 2 of the Murillo WHIP personal draft. So this is the one that we adopted in the last meeting. And since that, we have incorporated several changes into this 0.1 version of the WeSweep. Mainly, there was from feedback received in the mailing list about the previous draft. For example, to not require the web server to be publicly accessible, but just request that either the server returns no candidates or all the candidates in the SDP answer that are returned from in the SDP answer. Also, some clarifications regarding the responses of the trickle ice and ice restart batch request to the endpoint resource. Mainly to differentiate that if it is the server can return two different uh, response codes with content or without content, regarding if it is an ice trickle, because the server does not require to send back any new information, or if it is a nice restart, it has to return a 200 OK with an SDP with the new ICE username fragment and password, so the client can do the ICE restart properly. Also, remove the 405 responses from the web server if it does not understand the trickle ICE request. Now we are mandating that all the servers has to answer properly. The server is free anyway to ignore the candidates anymore. For example, if you are doing a slide, you have just to return 204, but we are not adding any complexity about adding having the client to check if the response codes and do one thing or another depending on it. So just if the server does not need to do anything with the new ICE candidates, just ignore it and it will be fine. And we have added and some handling of the out of order requests, because as yes, Colin?
Just getting permissions, just getting my permissions here. So I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. So when we get this patch with the new SDP on the server, you can basically ignore all the stuff that's in it. Like that doesn't sound really very right to me. It sounds like that will create lots of problems if some clients are processing the SDP and some are not processing the SDP.
It's not the servers. I mean, if you are doing a slide, I mean, you don't need the ICE candidates returning from the.
I'm not even talking about like if you get a patch with a new piece of SDP, do you have to? I may have misunderstood what you said. Actually, I guess was just my question. I mean,
yeah, okay.
When you get a patch with SDP, do you have to process it like you would in JSON?
Well, the patch information is only contains the ICE candidate, so we can only contain a new ICE candidate or the information for doing an ICE restart. So if you're doing, so it's not changing any kind of other parameters that are not ICE related. So it can only be triggered for a trickle ICE for providing new candidates, or for a new username and fragment for doing an ICE restart. So.
Okay. So it can. So this is deeply limited what can be in that patch to just the only thing that's allowed to change is trickle ICE candidates. Basically, is that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I misunderstood what you said in that case. I get it. That makes more sense now. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And also the last point was a tentative about how to handle out of order requests. I think it is further explained in next slide. Also, clarification on authentication and what is the token generation and usage, because it was misunderstood by some people that we needed to use OAuth 2 tokens in the beer header, and it is just explaining that the token generation is just up to the server to decide what is their meaning and usage, and the only thing that the client has to do is just to populate the authentication header with the beer extension. Also, we have added a new option to provide the tool server configuration via the link headers, both in the option request or in the 200 response. There is more on this later. And also just one restriction to just to not allow redirection on the resource or URL. So the location header that it's returning in the 200 OK must be a final response, a final URL, so just to prevent any kind of issues in the implementations. So next slide, please. This is the first thing
Sorry,
that
just a quick question on that last point. So that is,
Yep.
you're basically saying we can't have any 300 class responses when posting to, this is the resource URL, or like the initial URL, or the one that you get back from it?
the one you get back from it.
Okay, so the first one can still redirect, right?
Yeah, I still
Okay.
tended to, or I'm open to discuss the first one, because the problem is that typically the libraries when you are doing HTTP does not automatically perform redirections on posts with bodies. So it will be up to the client has to retrieve the 307 request and do another request. So, and I think, for example, that none of the clients that we are we have tested in the hackathons are actually doing that. So maybe it's a constraint, something that we have to think about, because it will probably be not very widely implemented. So better just remove the requirement for the draft, but I'm open to discuss on this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll have to think about that a bit more.
Yeah. So one thing that has been come out from both the implementation of the draft is that the SDP fragment that we are using we are using the SDP fragment for Tricklize is a bit awkward to be used, because if especially because we are doing bundle, so you have to, and then the ABNF of the SDP fragment does not allow the candidates to be at session level, and it also forces you to put RTP ABP. So it is kind of very awkward, because we are in WebRTC, we are not doing RTP ABP. So the question is, if we continue using this the SAT format that it is in the SDP fragment RFC, or if we just extend the ABNF, that it is something that it is allowed by the RFC, and just allow the candidates and ICE staff to be also present at session level, so we don't have to include the fake M line with the MID, that it is has no meaning for us. So that's the first question. I'm not sure if I would personally prefer it, but as we have to extend a different RFC, I don't know how it is, if it is feasible or not. I'm not sure if anyone has a view on this, or if we can just discuss it later on the mailing list. Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure people fully understand what you're proposing here. I know I don't understand why this is, or what you're proposing changing. I just don't think I followed it. I don't have an opinion. I don't understand.
Okay, so yeah, let me explain. The first part of the first part is what we are sending now, that it is according to the SDP fragment. I think it was, I don't recall exactly the RFC number, but it does not allow the
SDP fragment allows you to send any valid SDP. So any ABNF that's in, right? So
no, the one we're using is the Tricklize. Let me find it, because I don't know exactly from memory. If anyone can find it faster than I do.
I could remember very wrong too. I mean, Adam was involved with this. I think he probably remembers too.
So
RFC 8840.
yeah, 8840. The IBNF in the session level does not allow the ICE candidates. It must be in the medial level. So you want to RFC 8840, I'm going to 9.2 grammar. we are restricted on what we are allowed to send in the session level. So, for example, we cannot send the ICE candidates, and the ICE candidates can only be sent in the media level.
Okay.
So the idea would be to extend this ABNF and to allow the trickle ICE attribute fields to also be used in session level, so we can avoid having.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think you need to go change a version of patch that allows that, right? I mean, it's not just like changing the ABNF will magically make this go away. I mean, whatever reasons that's like that in the original draft needs, like, we need a different. It's no longer patch once we do this, right? That's what you're telling me.
It is patch. The only thing is that as we are doing bundle, we don't need the candidates in each media line. We just can send the candidates for at session level, meaning that it will apply to all media levels. In fact, we are just asking to only send the candidates for the first media level. So both, it is just a matter of syntax. Is the meaning is exactly the same. And
so the notion here is, because we're bundled and would not have to, it's like we'd have to send the same candidates multiple times. That's what you're trying to avoid?
Yeah, and also trying to clean up a bit of the syntax.
Like, bundle is required by the spec right now. And so he's saying basically, like, that results in the different media sections not being able to go to different servers. So why do we need to repeat all the ICE candidates in all the different media sections? Why not put them in the session level, make it clear, like, we're bundling, there's only one ICE session, it cannot go to different servers, but it requires spec changes. I think that's what Sergio is trying to ask you.
Yeah, just to clarify, I mean, we are requiring bundle to be always being used. So just to simplify the implementation. And I mean, the first one, the first SDP fragment is working right now. The only thing is that it is a bit awkward and can cause problems in the implementations, because it is a bit awkward what we are sending if you are coming from WebRTC. And probably the second one is more straightforward, but it is just a matter of the syntax of how the candidates are encoded, and not what is the information is there or how it is handled.
Okay. Look, I guess certainly I'm understanding better now what you're talking about. It makes sense. Thank you. I think, like, as you start changing how existing libraries process this stuff and things, I mean, every one of these things, my question is going to be like, why? Like, why would, I mean, it can't be bandwidth saving. That's not a good answer in this case. That cannot possibly be the answer. So I just would ask, what's the minimal set of changes of what people have already implemented that need to be done for this? And I think really I think when I read the draft, I really wonder why we're doing it in the general direction of the client generates the offer. Why doesn't the server generate the offer, and the other way the answer? All of these patching problems, those trickle ICE problems, a ton of these problems go away if you reverse the direction of that, right?
But as we are doing ingest, is typically the idea is that the client is the one that initiates the communication. So
of course, the client would initiate. The client would initiate an HTTP post or something to create a new resource, but the resource would come back along with the offer, and then you'd send back up the answer, right? So of course, it's still the client that initiates the transaction, but it puts, right now, the hard part in dealing all of this is matching up offers and answers, and you wouldn't have to do all that because the browser would be implementing it. That side and that end of it would make it much easier. So I mean, and it would make these problems all go away too, right?
No, because you just need to send the candidates, the ICE candidates. So you need to. This is not. We could just chosen a JSON format.
There'd basically be no trickle ICE at that point, right? Because the offer would contain the one ICE Lite global IP, or static IP, right?
Yeah, but
and the browser doesn't actually need. That's done. You're done.
No, but you need to signal. You need to signal back the ICE candidates from the client to the browser. So
Sure.
This is patch request is what it is signaling the candidates from the client that it is receiving that are gathered through.
Let me put it this way. Why are you doing trickle? You just collect them up in the browser and send them, like, not trickle. Just send them all. Send it send a fully formed SDP answer?
Just to be able to do it faster, because for example, in my machine, it takes more than 30 seconds of the ICE candidates to get into
No,
finish.
this is ridiculous. Just time, whatever you get in the first, like the first candidate you get is going to work. So timeout after like 150 milliseconds, after 200 milliseconds and send it. I mean, like people don't wait 50 seconds for ICE. That's not how implementations work. So.
I agree, but I mean, then it was this was discussed a while ago, and also we also need to support ICE restart. So this way allows to both ICE restart and ICE candidates and trickle candidates to be implemented. So I'm not sure. I mean, an implementation can really do what you are proposing. I mean, just wait for all the candidates and send the candidates in the initial SDP without having to wait for the new ICE trickle candidates, and do not set the patch request. So, but I think that this is a different discussion. This discussion that I wanted to trigger right now, just about the format about the candidates. How should
okay, but this thing is, you want to have a detailed conversation about changing an A, B, and F. But we don't understand why you need that, and we don't understand why the architecture causes the need for that. So it's back to that usual conversation where you have an implementation and want to detect a minute detail of the existing implementation without really hitting the requirements or why we need this or what we need to change. I mean, that's why it's sort of hard to follow exactly what's being proposed. We don't understand the meta issue.
Okay, the only the change is because we are using bundles, so it does not make sense and to have to signal the candidates.
Okay, you are saying it does not make sense to send them on email.
Yeah.
Why does that not make sense? Like, what's the requirement that's driving? And look, I'm not arguing against that. I'm perfectly fine.
No. It's just
I don't understand like why we'd go and change things we don't need to change, right?
If, for example, in the current implementations, you don't have the MID in the API, the W3C API, you don't have the MID, so you have to get the MID. You have to get the transceiver and get the MID. Also get the audio type. So it's not much. So yeah, I just was asking if it makes sense. I mean, current implementation are working fine with the first instance.
I'm asking a question like why do you want to move those to session level from the media level? I'm not arguing for or against it in any way whatsoever, but I don't understand the connection of the W3C API to what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that we are doing bundling, so it's so we can just send the candidates at the session level. SDP supports sending candidates in the session level, but this SDP fragment don't. So the idea is if we should just extend the fragment to also support the candidates in the session level or not.
Okay.
Because the SDP already supported, so it is just a restriction in how the SDP fragment works, and not how SDP with session level candidates works.
What's the advantages of doing that?
Probably will just prevent some interoperability issues.
It sounds more like it's going to cause them than prevent them. I mean, I'm all for reducing interoperability issues, but I'm not. It seems the opposite of that.
I mean, I'm fine with raising it. I mean, just was raising the question. The current implementation are already working fine with the first one. So if no one sees a reason to move to the second one, I'm fine to leave it as it is. So just I didn't expect it to be so controversial. So, but I mean, I'm fine to keep it as it is right now.
I apologize. I'm not sure it is. It might be better that way or not better that way. It's just like I mean, I would be all for something that reduced interoperability problems, made things simpler and easier, right? But which way this is on that is not clear to me. I'm not arguing it one way or the other. I'm just sort of saying that it's like this is not going as an explanation. I understand what, like, how to make this decision or even really what the impact of this changes are.
Fair enough, Colin. Can we try to take this to the list of the repo? All right, thanks. Martin, you're next.
There. let's try to separate these things out. First thing is you don't get to change the definition of what's in 8840 here. It looks like you're asking for something that's fundamentally different than what's defined. So define something fundamentally different and describe how it works and move on. I don't think there's anything particularly complicated with what you're asking for, but it's not what's in RFC 8840. So from that perspective, it's if you want to move things to, if you want to move candidates to the session level, then define something that has candidates at the session level. I think that's the sensible approach for that. The other thing was with ICE restart, the way that WebRTC generally works is you have a complete offer answer exchange. And it seems to me like you could do the same here quite reasonably if you've got the ability to run another offer answer in the same session. And if you don't, then again, define a new format.
But again, for ICE restart, you don't really need a new SDP answer offer. You just need to generate a new username fragment and username password. So that is the only thing that it is required. Obviously, you in SDP in WebRTC we are generating a full offer answer, but it is not because it is mandated to do an SDP offer answer again. You just need to date the username and password. That's also this is something that it is already available in SVC 8840. So it is the mechanism is explained in there, and you just need to patch both the offer and the answer with this new information, and just do a new SDP offer answer locally. But you don't really need to do any change to all the RTP or media layer. So why do you want to send?
That's understood. I'm just talking about ensuring that things are consistent with other systems and having you justify those things. I think you have justified them, but don't use 8840. Point at 8840 for all of the behavior, but you can't use the format.
Why not?
And updating it is just not going to work.
I mean, if we use the same format on 8840, why we can't use 8?
It's not the same format.
Well, if we use the same format, yeah, no, I mean, if we use the same format, because what I'm proposing is to change it, but what is in the draft is exactly the same format.
Okay, I'm not understanding you at all. Sorry, coming.
No, what I mean is
to be clearer. Is it the same format or is it not?
Currently, it is the same format. What I was proposing is if we should change it, but currently what it is in the draft, it's using the exact RFC 8840 format.
Right, I understood that, but what are you proposing to change? What you use or 8840?
I'm not sorry, I'm not getting the questions here. So
you could change what you're using to define a new format, or you could change the definition of STP frag in 8840. I'm saying that you should not do. You should not attempt to update 8840. You should define a new format, because otherwise, well, it's not going to be 8840.
Okay, so but anyway, that's clear, and I think that what we just what if we don't do nothing, then this is it. I mean, because what this is already in the current draft is using RFC 8840 as it is without any changes at all. So the question is if we should change it, but it seems that the answer is no. So we just can stick to what it is in there, and we will be fine.
Just a second, I want to just jump in ahead of Tim here, okay? I really apologize, but I think Martin and I are sort of saying the same thing, which is there's two paths, and we're not arguing which one you should take. You could use 8840 exactly like it is, or you could have a different session level syntax, which may be the right thing to do. But if you do that, you need to define something that's not 8840 that specifies it. And neither of us is arguing which one of those paths is best. We're just saying you need to. those are the two paths in front of you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I understood, and I think that it is easier to just ask for us to keep to 8840 and not do any change, and just and well, just a minor overhead, but it is understood, and everyone will implement it. I mean, that's not such a big issue.
Can hear like every other word very low.
So am I in the queue still? Yes, I am.
Oh, I can hear you.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to say I think the SDP fragment's the wrong answer to this. We've got a bit of experience of doing this kind of thing, and actually it turns out to be much easier to send something that looks quite like a diff and then synthesize the offer answer out of that. I just don't, I mean, SDP fragment's the wrong answer, and the reason we're struggling with it is because it's the wrong answer. We should be cooking up our own format, and whether maybe it should look a bit like it, but actually I think it should be quite different. It should look more like what everybody else does with patch.
So I just wanted to respond to some of the things that Colin was saying. He was raising some sort of fundamental architectural issues. And the key point that I want to make is that the presence of trickle ice in Wish isn't some like accidental relic that arises from the way that we're like deciding to send the offer from one direction or the other. It's a requirement of the system in order to get broadcasts up and running as quickly as possible. So making changes that obviate this question by removing trickle from the solution makes it unsuitable for at least our purposes.
So I don't know if I'm in the queue. It wasn't clear to me.
You are in the queue.
Okay,
closer real quick.
So the first point is that I entirely agree with that. So if you live in the luxury of a network in which there is no turn servers, trickle ice seems like a useless complication. If, like me, you have to suffer through networks that do require turn, then if you're trying to probe all turn servers before you even attempt to send an offer, it's going to give a bad user experience. The second point I want to make is a little bit orthogonal. I think that the distinction between an ICE candidate and an ICE restart should happen 120 layers above parsing of SDP. I want to know, I'm the server, and I want to know whether the client is doing a nice restart or sending me a nice candidate straight away. I want it at the HTTP layer. I don't see why we are refusing to put either a URL parameter or an HTTP header that tells the server explicitly whether we're doing a nice restart or sending a nice candidate. That is a simple solution. The client already knows what it's doing, so it might as well signal it explicitly at the framing layer. And it will make debugging easier. It will make implementation easier. I just don't understand why people are opposed to that. Thank you.
We need to
This
take
is
it to the
also-
list. Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, this is also listed in the next bullets. I mean, currently we are using the same request for both trickle ice and ice restart because the SDP fragment in RFC 8840 allows to do that in the same request. So the first question is if we should do something different. They just to signal that the client is just sending a trickle ice or a ice restart. But I think that it is also has to be with how do we handle out of order patch requests, because obviously we don't want the client to do any kind of blocking for any HTTP request response has been received before issuing a new one. Because, for example, if you are doing a nice restart because you have a network change, probably then you have some previous HTTP posts that will never be the answer, or you will have to wait for the timeout for it to be received. So the question is how to deal with this out of order requests on the server side. And we have two different cases. One, if we receive first a nice candidate, we send a nice candidate and then a nice restart, but we receive it in the other way, in the other order. So we receive first the restart and then the ICE candidate. These new candidates or these old candidates must be discarded. But how do we know that it is an old candidate and not a new ICE restart? And the other one is that if it is an IRES restart and then an ICE candidate, and you receive the ICE candidate for that it is still valid, but you have not yet done the ICE restart. Should the ICE restart, we cannot discard the ICE candidate because it may prevent the connectivity to be completed. And if this ICE candidate should also trigger an ICE restart anyway.
So yes, it doesn't solve all issues. The fact of having this one bit of information, so Martin is suggesting using different content types, that's fine with me. But having very early in your server the information, whether this is the ICE restart or whether this is an ICE candidate, doesn't cost anything to the client, makes the life of the server much simpler, and especially makes debugging of issues much simpler. And so I think that's something very cheap that makes things better, and I think we should add that. And I agree with you, it does not solve all possible problems.
Now, how to differentiate a normal ICE candidate or a patch request from a trickle ICE candidate or a nice restart can be done if by checking if we are doing it on the server, checking the client UFrag, and if it is not, then it is a nice restart. So it is something that can be done easily. The only thing is what happened if with this out of order request, because we either have to mandate the server to keep a small list of the previous username and password to detect previously used username and fragments to discard to detect this out of order request, or if we should have just put a patch or a timestamp on the request to make sure that when so the server can know if the client either request has been out of order or not. Adam?
I know it's sort of orthogonal to the issue that Julius is raising, but in terms of ensuring ordering, Martin has pointed something out in the chat that I'm a little embarrassed didn't occur to me earlier. We have a mechanism in HTTP to ensure this kind of ordering already. We have conditional operations using e-tags, and I think that would be a much cleaner way to handle ensuring that you're not putting state on top of stale state. You're not putting stale state on top of existing state for these sorts of cases, instead of doing something like a sequence number.
Yeah, I assume that HTTP has some kind of way to prevent it, but I didn't want it to put it in the draft because it may be wrong. So, Martin, if you could send me the information about where to look exactly, I could try to propose something to the list.
Yeah, I can send that to you.
Okay. And the last big change in the draft was to provide the the turn server configuration back to the client from the server. What we have proposed is to just to map the information, for example, that it is currently in the W63 APIs to a link header that just as the URL, the username, the credential, and the credential type. That this is exactly the same definition that we are doing in the W3C APIs for these options. And then put the a rel type of iServer, so we can check in the client which that this link is for the iServer configuration. There is a typo here because the first one, the stone one, should also have the rel attribute. And Martin, why is not a valid format?
This is just me quibbling. You've got colons instead of equal signs, and you've got your angle brackets. But I was going to say this is a reasonable thing to do.
Okay, I will double check the format. I mean, it was just an example, but okay. So sorry for getting it wrong. And one thing that we have currently is that both the WebRTC and the RTC Web RFCs and APIs allows to update the configuration, the turn server and stone server configuration before the gathering phase has been started. That will be before putting or setting the remote description. So, but we thought that the implementation will not allow to do that. So we have said that either this information can be sent in an options on an option request to the resource or to the endpoint URL, or in both in the HTTP post response. But we have seen that both the majors one, that implementation, the limnice and the browsers supports it correctly. So maybe we can just remove this retrieval of information in the options request, just because, for example, if you are using an external provider and you are, for example, I am using Twilio, I will have to make 2 requests for each when only one is needed. So maybe it's if it is not really needed, I would prefer to remove the configuration to be returned in the options request, and only have the options for cores.
Yeah, I don't know if I can chime in already. I was in queue, sorry. Yeah, just to mention that, I mean, you say that GStreamer has a patch in the works, but actually the issue there is that, for instance, my web client is currently based on GStreamer, and GStreamer doesn't allow you to do that update, which is why in my current implementation, I have to rely on options to get that working actually. And so the problem is that even if you get a patch in GStreamer today, GStreamer has its own development cycle, and that can take a long time before it actually lands in all the major distributions that are available out of box to everybody, which means that even if it's ready today, it may only be available to most people that are interested in this in 1 year or 2 years or something like this. So this is just really from a practical perspective, it may make sense to, at least for the people that are interested in using GStreamer, it may be other implementations, I don't know, to keep options at least as an available option. And I don't know whether it should be a must, a should, a may, or whatever. It's just to basically allow this option to be available.
I mean, I'm fine also with that, because anyway, what we are restricting is that the options must be authenticated. So to be able to do to retrieve the tool server configuration. So if you are not doing if you don't really need it, then you will not provide it. What we can do is just that the options, doing the options, returning the configuration, not the option is like kind of optional, but in the post it is mandatory, meaning that you cannot send it only in the options. So probably if you support doing the configuration when you receive the post request, you avoid doing the first option request to prevent the server to have to fetch the credential twice.
Check. We've got about 15 minutes left. I just want to make sure that people are keeping it concise so we can try to get through as much of the presentation as possible. Thanks.
So I'm in favor of keeping this in options, because I think otherwise aren't you effectively mandating trickle ice as well? Because you wouldn't get a stun result because you didn't have a stun server set. Okay. So your initial offer wouldn't have any candidates other than the locally discovered addresses in them. And so you're kind of, if you take this out of options, then you're forcing trickle ice on everybody. And so you're radically complicating some of the stupider clients like mine.
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting. So I wanted to give a +1 to Lorenzo said and add on that the bigger problem is probably not the GStreamer release schedule as much as browser release schedules. Right now, you need to have this information before you start your initial peer connection to get the candidates that you're going to put into the offer in the first place. So I think while I proposed options as being something transitional, I think it's going to be a very long transitional phase that we can't elide at this point. And for that reason, I don't think that you can make it optional in options. I think this needs to be there at least for a fairly long time. I mean, maybe we can come back and revisit this 4 or 5 years in the future and deprecate that. It's the final point on that I want to make is whenever you see an options like this, you're pretty much guaranteed that there's a post coming along. And it seems to me that the server should just be able to cast the credentials for what is a very short period of time and avoid having this double access to try to get the credentials the second time. I think this is something that can be fairly easily optimized in the server itself.
Well, anyway, we can keep it. And yeah, I'm fine to keep it. Can we move to the next slide? So Lorenzo, you can present fast the results from the hackathon, because we only have 10 minutes left. I'm not sure if we'll have time for the rest.
Yeah,
of the
sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if the chairs wanted to shift the agenda a bit because there's limited time. Otherwise, I can definitely present the hackathon results quickly.
To show the hackathon results, we did have 2 other presentations about implementation experience. So I'm hoping you can modulate as much as you can to go quick so that we can try to at least touch on both sets of presentations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. So I preloaded the slides, by the way. So if you want, I can just grab the slides and control them myself.
Go ahead.
But I think you need to release the current slide deck first. Thanks. Yeah, just to be quick, this is a very brief overview of what we ended up doing in the hackathon week before the IETF started. And basically, the main objective was not really just testing WIP by itself, but it also was a very good opportunity for us to test different WebRTC stacks with each other, because most of the times we use libWebRTC one way or the other, and instead in this case we had several clients and servers talking using very different stacks instead. And so this was a unique opportunity to have a hit at that as well. And we actually did a first interop round a few weeks ago that involved me, Sergio, Julius, and Gustavo Garcia as well, and that was quite successful and ended up providing a lot of feedback for 0.1. And in this case, we ended up having some more implementations to test. So there was mine that is based on Janus, there was Julius based on Galim, Sergio integrated this in Millicast, and then there was a new SFU based on Pion that supported this, and multiple clients that could actually be taken advantage for the purpose, again, using different stacks like IORTC, Pion, the stack that team implemented for Raspberry Pis, and so on and so forth. And let's say the end result was pretty much successful, mostly successful, more successful than this slide might suggest. Basically, the green means everything worked out of the box. Yellow means some things needed to be changed in the implementation on either side to get something working. And orange and red instead meant different issues that happened that basically prevented a successful setup at the time being, which may or may not be related to WIP itself, though. In some cases, it was related to, for instance, the different stack implementations, or different stack implementations unable to work with each other, or even just different codecs, because, for instance, some endpoints are hard-coded to send BP8, and that SFU, for instance, only supports H.264 for ingestion, which means that in that case, that's the reason why the interop test didn't work, which isn't really a fault in WIP, but just basically what the negotiation ended up causing. There were a few issues, as I mentioned, related to the WebRTC stacks that needed to be fixed. In some cases, it was just basically some basic firewall problems and so on and so forth. So I won't really bother you with the details about all this. You can just have a look at the slides for that. What I really want to stress out was that this first interop test was mostly focused on the basics. So we really just wanted to make sure that a WIP client could basically do a handshake with a WIP server and get something working, so a WebRTC stream that could be consumed somehow, and basically ensuring that audio and video would work across these different implementations. And that does sound, that did basically sound like a good starting point for us. And what we really want to do next, though, is basically start looking a bit more in depth at other functionality. For instance, we've spent a lot of time now talking about ice restarts and how to actually trickle candidates and so on and so forth. And that's not something that we have tackled so far. Some more issues related to possibly orphan sessions if you don't do an HTTP delete, for instance, whether or not the server is able to detect stuff automatically. We've mentioned the link support for stun and turn auto configuration, so whether or not post versus options can cause issues, anything related to bearer tokens and stuff like this. So, and this was the interop testing team. So it was basically 6 of us working together during past week. And I don't know if you have any quick question for us at this specific point, or if you're satisfied with this very quick overview.
I have to leave it as we're good, and they should take questions to the list or to GitHub, either way. And I'd like to kind of arbitrarily pick Julius to go next. I know I told him we get 10 minutes, but we can jump. Hopefully, we can do it kind of quickly, or at least get because we have at least 2. There was going to be a third, couple seconds about implementation experience, but people should feel free to comment on the mailing list. I did post the slides, so that's good. Julius, are you good? I can present your slides for you.
Thank you. So I've got 3 minutes, right? Hi, I'm Julius Krobacek. Next slide, please.
You have about 5.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so Galeen is a WebRTC SFU, which I implemented during the first French lockdown. It has some properties that are cool, and the development was partially supported by NextCD. Next, please. And at some point, Dave Tapp told me about WIP. I implemented WIP in Galeen. And the main, and unlike some of the other implementations, a first-class implementation. It's actually part of the server. I'm not attempting to translate into Galeen's native signal and protocol. Next, please. And so the good news is that WIP works and it's easy to implement. I did it in one night. There's 427 lines of code that are specific to WIP. And there's 50 lines of patches to Galen's core, but that's Galen's fault because I'm not exporting enough of the internal data structures. And I had help. I had a client, and that was Lorenzo Miniero's simple WIP client. Next, please. So it's 5 shell commands. If you need a server to test your WIP client against, it's literally 5 commands to get it running. Next, please. Okay, and so that was the good news. I had some minor difficulties, and the main reason for that is that I'm not competent, and that means that I'm a precious resource because I'm currently the only incompetent WIP implementer. But if WIP becomes successful, then I will no longer be the only incompetent WIP implementer, hopefully. And so we must aim the draft at incompetence. And I had mainly 4 difficulties. These were cores, URL multiplexing, authentication, and distinguishing, what I mentioned already, candidates from restarts. Next, please. Lorenzo explained cores to me. I knew nothing about cores. I had vaguely heard about it. And asking Lorenzo for help is something that doesn't scale. So I think that the draft should explain cores, or at least give a link. Next, please. So the other difficulty is that in Galen, we want to have a very simple user interface. We have just one URL, both for the native JavaScript client and the WIP request. And so I would really like if WIP could mandate that there is a URL parameter that mentions that this is a WIP request so that we don't have to give multiple URLs to clients. Next, please. Okay, authorization, we've been through that already. I won't bore you with it anymore, but I would like to see HTTP basic. ICE restarts, we've mentioned it already. Next, please. Okay, so in conclusion, it's 1 night and 500 lines of code. And thanks a lot to everyone who helped. I'm done.
Pretty impressive. Thank you for condensing that into 4 minutes. I guess my point about the implementation experience is it really does help us as chairs move things forward. So if we really only have a few things less that we need to kind of agree upon, that really makes me feel really great, because I did think that this wasn't going to take forever. But again, I'm hoping that we can take everything else to the list. And I do want to apologize for the others who made presentations. Please check them out in the GitHub repo and in the data tracker. The one final thing I think I want to check on the list is, at what point do we need to go to other working groups that we said we'd liaise with to, make sure we get an early review that we're not on the wrong path, because I would hate for the implementations to get out in the wild and get corrected later. I think that is it, and we'll have to thank you for your time, and let's take everything else to the list.